And we're back with another episode of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale. I'm Don Henniger. Joining me, as always, is my podcast partner and a man who always makes the honor roll in Scottsdale.
Hey, Headmaster Henniger. How are you?
Good, Kevin Maxwell. How are you, buddy?
Good, thanks.
Kevin, today we're going to meet 3 of the 6 candidates running for 3 seats on the Scottsdale Unified School District's governing board. Donna Lewis, Matt Pittinsky, and Mike Sharkey. They're campaigning together under a Protect SUSD banner with a focus on building a stronger community together. And when we were asked if we could feature them as guests on our podcast, well, it was really easy to say yes, right, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no in that one, that's for sure. So today, let's first meet them. I'll ask each of them to tell us a little bit about who they are, their backgrounds, and what they feel is the most important issue facing the district right now. And then we're going to go and get into some of the issues after that. So Donna, let's start with you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Kevin, for having all of us on here. It's a pleasure to be in your studio. I'm Donna Lewis. I'm running for school board. I was a former elementary principal, teacher, middle school principal, high school principal, and of late, 8 years as a superintendent. I was Arizona's National Superintendent of the Year in 2021. And now I'm a professor at Northern Arizona University, and I'm studying successful principals and attributes of what successful principals do. And we're doing that work internationally. So it's just fun. And in thinking about being the most supportive and helpful to the Unified District in Scottsdale, I couldn't think of, first of all, 2 better partners than Mike and Matt. I mean, we have kind of a 3-legged stool going on with balance and differences of strengths. And my goal is to focus on the success of our children, to focus on the learning, to focus on our successful schools, to be supportive to our principals, and make sure that our efficient resources can be maximized so all kids can do really, really great stuff and grow and develop.
Thanks, Donna. Matt, next to you.
Thank you. And again, thank you for having us. And I echo Donna's comments about just being very lucky to be part of this team. So I'm Matt Pittinsky. I'm also a candidate for the school board. And I guess I have 3 hats that I wear in this context. One is I'm a parent. So I have 3 children and have had 12 years experience with Scottsdale schools, served on the site council of our elementary school and our middle school. And I have, my youngest is in a Scottsdale middle school. My oldest is in a Scottsdale high school. And then our middle child is in Brophy. So I have experience with different kinds of education providers. So I care as a parent about the future of our schools. The second hat would be a little bit of an education background as well, although certainly not as deep as Donna's. So I have a master's degree from Harvard in education policy, PhD from Columbia Teachers College in sociology of education, and originally came to Arizona to be a tenure track assistant professor at ASU. So I've taught future teachers and have a little bit of a background as an educator. But most of my experience is in business. So I've built 2 global education technology companies. The first is called Blackboard, the second Parchment. And Parchment's noteworthy because we built it here in Scottsdale. So I've had the experience of hiring SUSD grads. I've had the experience of recruiting employees to come live in Scottsdale. And of course, they'll ask about our schools. And so I appreciate that we have graduates who are going on to college, who are going right into the workforce. We have families who are relocating based on our schools. Our schools are so central to the economic health of our community. And I guess if there was one reason I'm running or one core issue, and then I'll hand it over, it would be, I guess, the governing board itself. We need a governing board made up of people who are out to make our schools better, who are out to build trust in our schools, and who appreciate that the role of the board is not to pursue their individual preferences and get involved in curriculum or get involved in hiring and firing of folks, but the job is really about hiring the superintendent and holding that person accountable and managing taxpayer dollars, and then finally setting policy and representing the community through policy. And if we get that right, I think we can stay focused on what Donna talked about, which is ultimately student learning.
Thanks, Matt. Mike.
You got it. Hey there, Mike Sharkey. So I am so happy to be with this team. And I think the thing you're going to hear consistently is experienced educational professionals. We've got decades of experience between us. And so it's like when you do that group project at school and like sometimes you think you're the only one doing all the work. like here, like we are all doing the work, and that's just a great place to be. So I'm a 24-year resident of Scottsdale. My wife and I have raised our kids here. Our twins went all through SUSD. They were Cochise, Cocopah, Chaparral, class of 2020.
Big C's.
So
The C's.
yep, all the way through. Been in the same house, kind of right between Cochise and Chaparral the whole time. My wife is an Arcadia alum, and I'm actually still actively involved. I am a mentor on the Chaparral High School robotics team. This will be my 9th year mentoring the team. So if we get into talking about high school robotics, we'll be here for 2 more hours.
All
So
right.
please
right.
do that at your own risk. And professionally, I work at ASU. So I'm the executive director of data and analysis in the technology department. So I play with educational data, and I've played with educational data for the last 20 plus years of my career at universities, companies. I'm the second level entrepreneur here. I only started one company. And so I started a company using educational data to predict student success at higher education level. And I did that about 10 years ago. And so, for me, similar to what Matt said, what I bring to the table and what I want to help is problem solving. The data analyst in me does very good at what is the problem we're trying to solve here? Let's get away from, emotions, loud people and talking, and let's break it down. What is that problem? Because you can't solve it until you define it. And I think we bring that to the table.
That's great. Yeah. Problem solving rather than problem creating, right? Which is a nice change of pace sometimes, isn't it? So we're going to move on to some of the issues now, and we'll start by directing a question to one of the candidates, and then we'll rotate that as we go along and give both the other 2 candidates a chance to weigh in on that question if they'd like to as well. Kevin, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Donna, for you, what are your thoughts on the current curriculum at the district? Are there changes you'd advocate for? And how well do you think that the curriculum we have prepares our students for success?
Well, I think we have an amazing, solid curriculum with limitations and scopes as identified by the state standards. And the state standards really are foundational. So we honor and want to stick with the state standards. Where I think we could grow, and that would be really exciting, is if we could move into some relevant and meaningful curriculum driven by the kids that would talk more about apprenticeships, mentorships, field trips with real hands-on experiences. I would encourage teachers to take more risks with science experiments where they could see things fail and then examine the failure and wonder, what did we learn from that? Let's try again, and make it culturally normal and acceptable to kind of fumble forward while we figure out what we've learned. That's what deductive and inductive and critical thinking really is all about. So I'd love to amplify our creative and critical thinking skills. Most of our teachers are already masters at it, and then they are sometimes within the 6.5, 7-hour day confined by standards implementation. And I'd love to stretch that a bit.
Great. Matt and Mike, do you have anything to comment on that, to add to it?
I would just add, we have to acknowledge that we have a real proficiency challenge as we support our students in terms of meeting math proficiency and English proficiency. So there's an opportunity, again, respecting state standards, for us to be innovators with supplemental curricula that can help come in and close that math achievement gap. I'm on the board of something called New Classrooms, which is focused on that. And there are curricula, especially technology-driven curricula, that can personalize learning and really look at kind of the skills history of a learner, going back to the most foundational skills and build for there. So on the supplemental side, especially in the context of closing the proficiency gap, we have an opportunity to be innovative.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here with folks that have such experience. Like, to me, when it comes to curriculum, like, what are your credentials? Why are you chiming in on an opinion? If we bring something up to the board about data science curriculum, I will be the first guy there talking to it. But otherwise, we've got experts. So happy to be with folks that know that.
Great.
Fantastic. Let's talk about budget and funding. So what's your approach to managing the district's budget? And how would you prioritize spending to support academic achievement and address teacher shortages and teacher pay, which is always an issue for everybody? And let's talk a little bit about what your views are on school bonds and overrides as a means of funding the district, and would you support them? And Matt, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, I would love to live in a world where starting at, yes, we've got the microphone to do that.
Yes, we do.
But I would love to live in a world where it started with the state. And it started with the level of state funding that comes to Scottsdale. So I think all of our listeners need to understand that, the most foundational source of funding is the state. Of course, there also are federal dollars that often follows directly specific populations of students, students in need, for example. Although we have an opportunity to be entrepreneurial when it comes to major foundations, applying for grants, and kind of finding our own sources as well. But it starts with the state, and then we have the override. And I am someone who supports overrides. Obviously, they have to be responsibly researched and developed, and they should be focused. But I support overrides because I recognize that, unfortunately, the funding we get from the state just isn't enough. Not every candidate running, believe it or not, supports overrides. And I say that because I've also had the experience as a parent when the override didn't pass years ago. I don't remember the year exactly, but my kids were in elementary school. And all of a sudden, as two working parents, we had half days every Wednesday. As parents who value the arts and, specials, I guess.
That must have been disruptive, right?
Yeah, those all went away.
Right.
And if you want to know, one of the critical moments, if you follow the graph of families leaving Scottsdale, it's when that override failed. And they suddenly realize that a lot of what they take for granted can't be taken for granted. And that gap between what other types of schools offer and what Scottsdale schools offer got very big. So I support overrides. From there, it's about choices. Mike speaks very well to this, so I'll probably hand it over to him. But budgets are ultimately about choices from security to instruction, to busing and food. It's all about choices. We ultimately want to put as much of our resources into the classroom and teaching and learning, but we also have to make choices.
Good point.
Yeah.
Mike, yeah.
That's a huge thing. It's trade-offs, right? It's sacrifices. In a perfect world, sure, let's give all the money to the teachers. I work at ASU. I've had, hey, we're going to get a 1% raise. We're going to get a 0% raise. Like, I understand where that comes from. I can pull money from my budget to give someone a raise, but if I'm pulling that out of my operational budget, that's money I never get back. And so, that's a trade-off. Is it important to give the money here, knowing that I'm sacrificing long-term stability? That's not an easy decision. Again, going back to our experienced educational professionals, we've been there, whether it's business budgets or school district budgets. We've made those decisions, been part of them. I've been going to the school board meetings from this year, and I watch the CFO and what she does and, presenting these options. It's hard, right? What's easy to do is sit there and yell and say, you don't give the teachers enough money. We would all want to give the teachers more money, but we got to give the bus drivers money, and we got to pave the parking lot. We got to fix the air conditioner. And so understanding that and approaching, going back to our problem solving, that's what we're bringing to the table.
Good point. Yeah, Donna.
Just about 85% of the budget is people.
Yeah.
And you always want to support your people, and especially in these inflationary times. And then the budget from the state needs to match that. So I echo what both my slate mates have said.
The slate mates. I love that. That's right. You're great.
Hey, Mike, since we're on the topic already, let me ask you this. Teacher retention is a problem, right? It's retention problem for every school district. And recruitment, what policies do you have or incentives you propose that would improve in teacher morale and retain high-quality teachers?
So I'm going to leave the dollars off the table because that's an obvious one from a salary standpoint. I put myself in the shoes of a teacher, and our twins went through their entire K-12 career at SUSD. And whenever we had a problem, we had a few of them. It wasn't perfect, but the first thing we did is we went to talk to the teacher. And the amount of care, love, and time that they put towards my children is amazing. So I think about that in context of I'm a teacher. I'm already in a state that doesn't value education as much as other places, and I'm a firm believer in valuing teachers as much as other professionals. What I don't want to do is create more problems for them. So I go to the board meetings and I see whether it's folks making public comments or folks on the board themselves, putting work on the table. I need you to go do this, or we should do I say to myself, do you realize the amount of work you're causing, whether it's for the VP of HR or the CFO or teachers, or, let's take away school counselors because that's not teaching. I was
Right.
talking to a neighbor of mine who teaches at a SUSD school, and the vice principal who handles behavioral issues said she had 52 appointments on her calendar in 1 month with behavioral issues. Yeah, let's take that
Wow.
away.
Right.
Where does that go to? It's going to go
Right.
to the teachers to handle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's, again, leaving the dollars off the table because that's a fairly, straightforward issue of let's pay them more, but don't create more problems for our teachers. They do so much, they care so much, and I don't want to exacerbate things.
Mm.
Yeah, they deserve a board that's
Yeah.
And the community does support them. I mean, after parents, teachers spend the most time with our children, and you talk to teachers, and they feel under threat. That I went to a parent-teacher night where it was very clear the teacher was very concerned teaching government in an election cycle. That all it took was one student to come home and say, "Mrs. So-and-so said this about Kamala Harris or Donald Trump," and then all of a sudden, they're the subject of a public comment at a board meeting. There's a worldview that distrusts our educational system. In fact, the slate that we're running against, their entire slogan is just be honest. And in that is an implicit distrust.
Mhm.
And that's an environment in which I don't think teachers feel supported or valued. And I don't know what happened over the last 15 to 20 years where teachers went from revered professionals to almost being treated like employees, where if a parent is unhappy, it's equivalent to saying, "I want to talk to your manager at a restaurant."
Right.
That is not how professionals should be treated. And our goal as a board is to create an environment in which teachers know that they're valued and supported.
Good point. Donna, you're good? Okay, let's get into a hot topic. Been hot lately, for sure. Equity and inclusion. So, Donna, you get to start off with this one. So how would you ensure that all students, regardless of their background, have equal access to educational opportunities? How would you engage with the community to ensure that diverse voices are represented when you're making decisions?
Well, all kids deserve access to gifted education. All kids deserve access to extra reading intervention support. All kids are students and learners. And no matter what their color, creed, or polka dots are, it is start where the child is, wherever the child, whatever the age. So let me give you a silly example, but we tend to use data as if it's a fixed asset. And when I've got a first grader walking into a classroom and they're, a first grade reader, but they're really in fourth grade, and we move that student to third grade reading. We've moved them 2 years in progress, but they're still considered a failure as a fourth grader.
Yeah.
There's an inherent problem systemically with that. So I would ask that we as a board talk about equity and access based on the growth of children, not necessarily just the fixed asset of standards and grade levels. And then in terms of inviting all sorts of parents, I've seen a variety of ways to be inclusive about parent committees and parent voice, where we make sure we have a combination of viewpoints, conservative viewpoints, liberal viewpoints, viewpoints from perhaps a poverty perspective, where I have 3 jobs and I can't be on the committee, but I'd still like a voice,
Mhm.
or people who have a strong feeling about how something should be and they have a ton of time. So you kind of want to make sure you speckle your committees with a variety of voices so that we can come together on our likenesses. Because I genuinely believe no matter how diverse we really are, we're 80% after the same thing.
Good point.
Yeah.
Mike?
I'll just add to that. Like, I don't want to conflate the national toxic DEI, SEL, CRT with we are a diverse environment. If you look at a North Scottsdale to a South Scottsdale, right? And so there was a proposal I saw at some point, you probably know better than I do, of a 4-day school week, right? And what would that mean? Well, like, great, if you're in an area where you've got a one parent at home, no problem. They'll take care of it on day 5. You got 2 working parents, that's a huge issue. So taking that into account and making sure that when we look at these decisions and potential things, that we're accounting for students up and down the district, that's a big thing. This is not like, will this work for my kid, or will this work for the stereotypical Scottsdale kid? Because there isn't. That's not a thing with our district.
Great point, Mike. Matt, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with what they said.
Good point. Yeah. Good answers on a tough
Yeah.
subject. So yeah, Kevin.
Man, I have one for you. This is one how would you integrate technology into the students' hands to help them succeed?
That's a great question. And it's one that I know my background, having worked in education technology, I've had the opportunity to see how technology are used at school districts throughout the country, universities throughout the country, and in that case, around the world. I should mention Parchment serves Scottsdale. So SUSD is actually a customer of Parchment. You might think that I'm just knee-jerk all for
Right.
how do we put as much technology as possible. But I'm not. I think it's a real challenge that we need to navigate at this moment. There was a time when, generally speaking, technology was not a big part of our students' lives outside the classroom. And the focus was how to use classroom time to build digital literacy and the skills that will make them productive in a technology-based economy. Now we live at a time when the opposite is true. Outside of school, their lives are totally dominated by very addictive technology. And it's prompting a rethink, myself included, about how much technology should be part of the school experience. I remember my oldest going to elementary school parent-teacher conferences for my oldest and getting, a big folder of all of these artifacts of her learning. And then by the time my youngest came, because of how much the classroom was based in Google Classroom and on Chromebooks, there was one or two actual examples in terms of physical paper that I could look at. And for that age grade, that's concerning. That said, obviously, there's an opportunity for technology to personalize learning. We talked about math and math proficiency. It's a crisis. It's not just a crisis in our school district. It's a crisis nationally, but it is also a crisis in our school district. Technology and the ability to assess a student's skills, not just are they proficient at this age grade, but what are all of the constituent skills that being proficient at this age grade require? And going back and saying, okay, if it's a sixth grader, here's what from fifth grade they still need to learn, from fourth grade, from third grade, from second grade, understanding that math builds, triaging that, and creating not an age grade approach to proficiency, but a skills-based approach to proficiency. That is incredibly exciting and transformational. So I want SUSD, I want to give our teachers the space to be innovative. I also do think it's the responsibility of the board to think about, at different age grades and at different parts of the school day, how do we create an environment that focuses on social and human development? And maybe that includes no technology.
I told you I talked your ear off about robotics, and y'all just kicked the door open. But I'm actually not going to go that heavy down it. The program we do, it's called FIRST, a global organization, and the founder, Dean Kamen, has a saying that kids don't make robots, robots make the kids. And if you look, so I've been doing this for 13 years now, 9 at Chaparral. We're not just sitting there talking to kids about like, hey, go get the pneumatic pump for this, or let's do rivets on this. We're talking communication, project management, strategy, right? All this goes in like, hey, someone's got to make reservations with the hotel in Flagstaff because we have a tournament there in 2 months. Who's going to do it? How do you pull that together? How are we paying for it? Like all that comes into play. So, my point being technology is not always the technology itself, right? It's those skills that are around it. And I love that.
Good point.
Well, and as we think about our future workforce and the role of artificial intelligence, we've got some serious grappling to do with, again, critical thinking and discernment of junk information from viable information. And how will our kids be more discerning about what is real and then what applies organically in a group setting with artificial intelligence and without? It's going to be very interesting how we evolve.
We need some involvement in the adult ranks for that too. So
Yes,
that's for
indeed.
sure. Let's talk a little bit about community engagement and transparency, another hot topic these days at school board meetings. So how will you ensure transparency in board decisions and district governance? How do you plan to involve parents, teachers, and other stakeholders when you're making decisions? And Mike, let's start with you.
Sure. Absolutely support community input, parent involvement. I mean, that is the core of what we do. I was looking at the Arizona School Board Association website, and something on there says you are a representative of the community for the schools. And, if elected, take that very, very seriously. So the one thing, as I've been going to these board meetings and observing, kind of put my data hat on again and using tools like Parent Connect, where parents can have input. There are ways to get input from not 3 loud parents who decided to show up at the board meeting that week, but from dozens or hundreds of parents who've made input, that we can really look at the essence of what's going on. There's a project my team did at ASU. We have a call center, and students call them. We take the transcripts of what they called about, and we could extract, say, what are the top 4 or 5 things they're calling about? Scholarships, tuition, right? You can do that in mass. So there are ways to take input without having to pay someone to read over 500 responses, where you can really understand what the issues are and still have humans go in and look at the details. So absolutely support that kind of input, but ways to get more and a broader slice of what our parent community is saying, as opposed to just, he or she who yells the loudest, because that's not a good way to run a board.
That's great. That's great. My other input to that?
Well, as a superintendent who had a governing board that won a state award for community engagement, we did a lot of it through access, opportunities for disagreement. And I think that was one of the healthiest things we did, was we set a stage for, even if you completely disagree with what the majority of the room is saying, it's important that you say it anyway, because we might be going down the wrong path. So let's listen to what you've got to say, and everybody's going to be respectful. This is not a bully setting. And I think it was really important for us to make sure that translators were available for many of our families who were intimidated. And we made sure that parent surveys were available to everyone. And if we didn't get them, we reminded them as often as possible without nagging. And we also came up with very, very creative text-friendly weigh-ins. How can you give a quick input just to give us your sense or your gist of how you want to handle the lunch program, or how you want to handle the change of the day or the schedules? Yeah.
Good idea. Yeah.
Hey, that's right there. And from the mic, I'll go ahead and ask this next one. What's your plan for this? Has to do with school facilities and infrastructure. So, what is your plan for maintaining and improving SUSD school facilities and infrastructure? And how would you address concerns about overcrowding and aging buildings in the district?
Well, first of all, we're lower in enrollment than we've been relative to our building capacity. So we may unpopularly need to look at possible boundary shifts. Nobody wants to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it, but it's something we may need to face. And so as we look at where we're under enrolled, we may need to think about moving. But if that means moving someone 20 miles just to equalize the building, that's not a viable or productive solution.
Right.
So that certainly is something to think about. In terms of the aging of buildings, we have an industry standard that I would trust our facilities team to bring to us and say, here's what we recommend and where the triage is for air conditioning support or HVAC support or plumbing support. Sometimes we don't even know that our sewage systems are crumbling because they're so many years old and we didn't expect to spend $100,000 there. So I would really expect a systematic approach to how to handle our aging buildings and take the best recommendations from a capital team.
Great. Anybody else want to talk about infrastructure at all? Or
Not Mike?
thoughts on
I would
it?
just say, I'm fortunate to be a family whose kids attended Cherokee, and so had the opportunity to see the pre-rebuild Cherokee and the post-rebuild Cherokee. I thought I was part of the committee that kind of designed it. It was an inclusive committee. It included the neighbors to think about things like lights and traffic flows. I could not have been more impressed with how the district executed that and what it looks like on the other side, including, sadly, addressing fundamental issues around building security and campus access in this world. And, similarly with CocoaPod, that rebuild happened years ago. But whenever I visit that campus, I'm impressed with the work that's been done. So I think we're very fortunate to have a district that thinks about our physical plan and executes it relatively well, at least in the recent history.
Yeah.
And the bonds.
And then, of course,
That's
that's
true.
why supporting bonds matters. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mike, any comments on that?
Just the comment that Donna made when she said, trust the professionals.
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
a building engineer.
Right.
I'm not a facilities expert. And I love the fact that we go with, there are people working in the district who this is their job and they can know how it's done and look at other districts. And I have so much respect for the professionals who do that.
So related to that, and Matt, we'll start with you. Let's talk a little bit about school safety and mental health. So how can we enhance student safety in our schools? How do you plan to address student mental health challenges? And what resources would you advocate for in terms of mental health support for students and staff?
Yeah, this picks up a little where Mike left off. Often when these questions are asked, I immediately think to myself, oh my gosh, do I have like a smart, cogent answer on really difficult topics for which people are experts? So I would start with where we left the last question, which is there are professionals in our district, particularly around campus security, who are knowledgeable about the best practices and the frameworks that various districts use. I would obviously, as a board member, insist that we are staying up to speed on the latest research. I would ask whether we are out there securing all of the funding that's available from different sources that can be used towards campus safety. Are there third parties who come in pro bono and evaluate? And can we take advantage of that? So I would certainly ask the prodding questions, but also at the same time respect that we've got 30 buildings, or 30 sites. I actually don't know how many discrete buildings we have, but we have 30 sites. They vary in their configuration and their history, different age grades, different best practices across all of those. On the mental health front, I think it starts with recognizing that mental health is a learning question. There's a worldview out there that takes the budget and simplistically says, if it's not money on the teacher in the classroom and with curriculum, then it is quote unquote wasted money. And the way that we could solve all educational problems is by just cutting everything except this very narrow understanding of what a school does. We have kids who live in poverty for whom the school is an environment where they get their meals and, so much more. So coming back to mental health, it starts with recognizing that mental health is related to teaching and learning. It is also related to security, but I don't like that. I don't want people to think of the reason why we should care as a district about mental health is that if we don't, God forbid, we have this, major safety incident. It should start from a recognition that we want to meet learners where they are and we want to provide the supports that allow them to thrive so that every student can be proficient. And there's also laws that speak to how we support students. So I think it starts with trusting and respecting the professionals. And second, it includes understanding that these questions and these responsibilities are not off topic to teaching and learning. They are very much on topic to teaching and learning.
Good point for sure. Don, okay, Mike, yeah.
You think about, take it up a level to our charter as a public school to serve and to educate all children in a safe and secure environment. And to me, it's negligent if you're saying, just teach English and history and math. We don't cherry pick, right? We can't say, I don't think this school's right for you because you've got issues. Why don't you go to the school down the road? Like, that's not what we do. We educate all children. And it would absolutely be negligent if we said, you know what? That's not our issue. We're here to teach math and English. I think that's a very narrow view and kind of an uneducated view of how things work in schools today.
I would add in partnership with our parents.
Absolutely.
Good point. Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Kevin, got another question there?
I don't.
Yeah, you do standardized testing. You want to take that one on?
I'm on the wrong page,
there
buddy.
you go.
And you
there
guys
you go,
know each
man.
other really well.
Okay.
You got a little
Sorry.
We're back and
ESP
forth.
going there? That's great.
We got some vibes here. Yeah.
All right. I'll go ahead and that out there. Mike, let me ask you this. What is your opinion on the role of standardized testing in evaluating student and teacher performance? And how would you balance accountability with the need to reduce pressure on students, teachers?
So a couple things. Donna mentioned it really well that, you can't look at things as just a number coming from the data guy, right? You're looking at increments and deltas. One thing that the district talked about this year is doing cohort analysis on students. So instead of saying, this percent of our second graders were proficient this year, and this percent of our second graders were proficient next year, you say, here's the second graders, and then next year, the third graders, what was the change? And the next year, they're fourth graders. So you're looking at cohort analysis, which is a very good way to look at it. So having that eye on the nuances in the data, that end of the day, these are kids, these aren't data points, and making sure
products. They're not widgets.
Right. This is not a transactional thing. Like, here's my kid. Your job, like Matt was saying, your job is to get them from point A to point B. If not, you're a failure. That's not how it works. And so, I understand somewhat assessment in education. I've been involved in 20 plus years in educational data and looking at outcomes and measuring outcomes. And so it's the best we have as a way to measure, but you're not going to say, if we don't meet this goal, then it's a failure. And what I don't like is people that use that as a tool, as a lever, as a wedge. Say, look, you said you were going to get from here to here and you didn't. You're a failure. You need to be fired. That's a really, really kind of obtuse view of how things work, as opposed to saying, all right, let's look at what happened. Why didn't we get there? What was the delta? Let's break it down. Was it one school? Was it one grade? There's a lot of information when you start to break data down and really want to be part of solving that, at that level.
Testing is a Polaroid snapshot. And we have many, many parts of a full 3D picture to look at in terms of how human development goes. What's the growth and spherical development of a complex human being. And successful principals, as we're studying internationally, have this amazing inherent gift and developed gift to work on relationships as it becomes inspiring for being intrinsically motivated to want to grow. And it may not show up on this linear version of a multiple choice test. That is all we're really so far capable of measuring schools with. So as soon as we can move a little bit of the AI into looking at versions of human development, it's going to be very exciting when we can find other ways to show great gains in schools and great human growth and development.
One thing I would add is this: when you decide to run for the school board and all of a sudden your name's on posters, you get feedback about the schools.
Just a little bit, huh?
as you should. And that's a responsibility of being a board member as well, of course. And so we get feedback on bathrooms being locked in the high schools for safety reasons, or how the half-day days affect working parents. One that I've gotten quite regularly is about the effect that the state standards has on teaching time. And in particular, a concern that there's a moment when the test happens and it's not the final week of school. And then it feels to some parents almost as if that's the end of the school year. And then everything else is sort of,
just whatever,
kind of free time to use in different ways. And that's one of the downsides of state testing, is school districts start to orient themselves to the test, not just the curriculum, but the time. And tests are never on the last day of school. There's several, they're often a month and a half perhaps, or a month before the school ends. And so, or 6 weeks. And so a common concern I do hear from parents is, we want to make sure that that test doesn't become the unofficial end of the school year. We want to make sure that there's continued rigorous curriculum and learning that's happening for our students after the test.
Good points for sure.
So I did want to reflect that since I brought
that's
it up.
great.
Yeah.
This has been a terrific conversation. As we get near the end of our time here, why don't we take a couple of minutes and have each one of you sort of wrap up, so sort of general thoughts, and if we didn't hit an issue here that you think is important, please bring that up, and let's get that on the table too. But why don't we do some final thoughts? And Mike, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I made the decision with my wife to do this and run for office. I've never run for office before. For me, I care tremendously about our schools. I've said in the past, our public schools aren't just schools. They're part of the community. They're the backbone of the community. It's, where your kids go to school and you meet other parents and you go to the park and you watch football games, and that's huge. And I really felt like that's under attack, that there's a chance that people would be happier with a transactional view of education. Well, I only do this, or I'll do this here and I'll do this here. And I firmly believe that would start to dissolve that kind of cohesiveness of a community. So I think this is really important. I think there is a risk that, our schools, which are, one of the top district in this state, has a chance of starting to be dissolved. And so, I'm obviously biased, but looking at the three of us and what we bring to the table for a zero pay, no minimum requirement position, I feel like we're giving Scottsdale parents and residents a gift of saying, look, we're committed, we're doing this. And it's just a matter of awareness. I firmly believe most people would love that kind of contribution, to have people of our caliber there. They just don't know what's going on. And so thank you very much for giving us a chance to talk and share this so people know what's going on and what we bring to the table. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Matt, let's go to you next.
I think I'd use my time a little bit to explain what's at stake. And that is the majority direction of our school board. So for those listeners who don't spend all their time breaking down the governance of Scottsdale schools, there are 5 seats on the board and 3 are up. So simple math, 3 out of 5, that is the majority of the direction for the next 4 years. And we've had 14 superintendents in the 13 years preceding our current superintendent. 14. I can tell you as a CEO that no company can be successful, no organization can be successful with that level of leadership, turnover, and instability. So when we look at the next 4 years and this majority, there are critical issues that will be determined. It only takes 3 votes to decide that an override doesn't go to the taxpayers.
Right.
And all of the rest of us who do want to fund our schools above and beyond the state's contribution lose the opportunity. It just takes 3 votes to fire the superintendent. And it is the job of a board to hold the superintendent accountable. At the same time, 14 superintendents in 13 years preceding our current superintendent, it's no wonders that teachers don't necessarily feel stable and school leaders feel stable. And it's hard to make progress on all the big issues that we talked about with that level of uncertainty at the leadership level. So this election really, really matters. And a part of why we decided to run as a team is because I'm not just asking for someone to vote for me if I earn their vote. Donna's not just asking that for her. Mike's not just asking that for him. We're asking all of the communities that we're connected to vote for all 3 of us. SLP for SUSD, because, and I say that because there's no D's or R's and you have to remember S and L and P, because we really need all 3 of us in order to ensure that our district stays focused on the substantive topics that you've raised and not whatever the national controversy or suspicion of the week is.
Learning is fun. We love to learn. And if we could lean in, remembering that we love to learn, all of a sudden the ricochet of the culture can be about pride in the schools and the source and the energy that we have as a group of learners, regardless of our age. And when we have that sense of pride, we're proud to be in the Scottsdale Unified School District. And when we're proud to be in the Scottsdale Unified School District, whether we have kids in it or not, our housing values go up, our business, business worth goes up. And so the value of a community is very central to its schools. And I can't think of being with a greater group than Sharkey, Lewis, and Pittinsky to make that happen.
Kevin, learning is fun, huh?
Learning is fun.
Yeah, I think we learned a little bit today.
Right, we did.
We had some fun too, didn't we?
We absolutely did have some fun today. And
Comes out later.
I was just,
Not multiple choice.
We'll be accountable.
Yeah.
We'll be held accountable. Don't worry.
yeah. What a great conversation.
Terrific conversation.
Mike used the word cohort analysis.
You did.
Let me ask you this. How many people that serve on leadership positions on the board know what cohort analysis
I
means?
can throw
like that.
conjoint analysis
There
at you
you
and
go.
blow your minds.
Wow. I mean, talk about 3 qualified candidates.
They certainly are. And great conversation. We both learned and we had some fun. So
Yeah.
learning and fun, all that together. And good luck to all of you as Election Day nears. Thanks to all of our listeners. Be sure to vote when you get your ballots.
Yeah.
They're going to be coming out in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And this is an important election. No question. And these school board races are down ballot. So go the distance on your ballot this year.
Yeah.
Go the distance down to the bottom of the ballot and vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. You can make your own minds up, but vote for the candidates you think are the most qualified. Pay attention, do your homework, and then vote. That's what we got to ask for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks for listening. In fact, over the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking to both of Scottsdale's mayoral candidates. So be sure to check in with us then. And otherwise, we'll see you then on Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale.